I am Joe, and I'm your host right here on WNRI 99.9 on the FM dial, 1380 on the AM dial. And you can also check us out streaming on WNRI.com, and you can listen to us anytime you want. And we also, not anytime you want, anywhere you are in the world. And you can also listen to the show right here on WNRI 99.9 FM every Saturday at 1 o'clock because we rebroadcast the show on Saturdays. So, a little about me if you haven't tuned in before. I'm a realtor and I'm licensed in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, working with buyers and sellers of residential and commercial property. If you're looking to buy or sell real estate in any of the other 48 states or in countries around the world, I have a network of partners that I work with. I'm a certified international property specialist, so I interface with a lot of global real estate professionals. And I have colleagues who are members of the National Association of Realtors in every state in the country. So if you are looking to buy something somewhere else, I can probably help you with that by connecting you with someone who's a specialist in that area. I work at REMAX. I've been with REMAX since, actually, before this show started. Good grief, this is the 12th year of the show, and I've been at REMAX since I think 2 years before that, so I've been at REMAX for quite a while, and I enjoy it. You know, that balloon, that red, white, and blue balloon, a lot of people recognize it, and they see it on a name tag or on a real estate sign, and they already know that they're going to be working with one of the most productive group of agents in the world, because no one in the world sells more real estate than REMAX. No one. We don't have the most agents, but we have some of the most productive agents in the industry. I work in my business is primarily relationship driven. It's not transactional. I like to stay in touch with my clients during the process and even after the process, so I can be of service to them if they have any questions. I just had a client. I sold him a house a few years ago, and he's looking to get a home equity loan. He reached out to me and he said, "Hey Joe, who should I reach out to get a home equity loan for my home? I want to do some work on it." Now he has a good interest rate, a low interest rate, so it doesn't really make sense for him to refinance his first mortgage. But he should have a lot of equity in his home, so he could get that equity line to do the repairs he needs to do to the house. And I referred him to Sean Hogan, who works at Shoreham Bank right here in Rhode Island, local guy. He was on the show back in December and talking about a lot of the different products they have. And, they can do equity loans, and they can also do, they're called Title I loans if there's not enough equity in the house for a conventional mortgage product. They have a Title I loan in order to take care of those types of repairs that may push the loan to value ratio over what is generally accepted for other mortgages. So that's usually 96.5% for an FHA product when you're purchasing. And with a Title I, you can go over 100% for that loan to value. So that's the amount of the loan compared to the value of the property, the home. People have thought and still think, many people think that when you buy a home, you need to put 20% down. If that were the case, you can do that, but that's not a requirement for all loans. There are a lot of different loan packages, loan products available, but that would be a loan to value of 80% because you're putting 20% of the value of the house as a down payment. The mortgage will cover the rest, which is 80%. So the loan to value would be 80%. Now, one of the things we were seeing back after the big real estate crash 15 years ago is a lot of homes had loans to value ratios that were over 100% because the value of the home had dropped from when the home was purchased. And that made things a little precarious because now, these folks had already played, the system to buy the home. Maybe they embellished a little bit with what their income was and whatnot. And so now the value of the home dropped. The payments, if they had adjustable rate mortgages, their payments went up, or maybe they lost some income, so they couldn't make the payment if it were a fixed rate mortgage. And now they can't just sell the house because the value is not there to pay off the loan. So that's why you had a lot of folks who had to do what's called a short sale, sell the home, and then deal with the shortfall with the bank, or it would get foreclosed on. Now, we're in a very, very different situation today. Okay, in 2025, home values in this part of the country have still been accumulating equity, increasing in value year over year. So if you have someone, and a colleague in my office, he just had someone, he owned a house, was paying for the house with his significant other. The relationship fell apart, and the guy couldn't pay for the house on his own pay, out of his own income, and it went into a distressed status, and that's he fell behind on his mortgage. So there was a notice of sale, which is the first step a bank takes to begin the foreclosure process. But he was able to put the house on the market at a price that was very attractive to buyers, sell it, and still walk away with over $100,000 in cash. Or he will. He hasn't done that yet. So, the thing is, even if he weren't that on top of things, banks typically don't want to be in the real estate business. So if a consumer found themselves in that situation and they communicated with the bank would, and many times what they do is they advise the homeowner to put the house on the market and sell it, because they would rather the homeowner sell the home, because if they have to foreclose on the home, that costs money, and then after they foreclose on it, they have to maintain it. Banks don't want to do that, and the typical number or ratio is 1% of the amount of the loan is what they have to spend in just monthly expenses on the property. Okay. So if you have a house, it's a $500,000 house, which is the median price of a single family home in Rhode Island about now. That's about $5,000 per month that the bank would have to pay to take care of the home. So to keep it insured, to keep it, the grass cut, to keep the heat on, all of those things add up. Typically, it's about 1% of the value of the loan. Okay, so banks do not want to be in the real estate business. So if you or someone who is in a situation, someone lost a job, or a relationship fell apart, or someone passed away, and they cannot continue to make the payments on their mortgage, have them reach out to me, 401-409-5030. Again, that's Joe Luca, 401-409-5030. Send me a text or call and leave a voicemail, and I will give you some guidance on what to do. Now, we'll sit down, we'll talk, I'll ask lots of questions, because maybe there's a way to get it to refinance your loan. Maybe there's a way we can sell the home. There could be a lot of different things that may be able to work for you. Okay, but rest assured, we will talk about everything, and all of your questions would be answered before any paperwork was exchanged or before you were asked to sign anything. Okay, because again, when I'm working with consumers, hopefully I earn their trust and they become a client. I am looking out for my client's best interests, not someone else's, not another buyer, not an investor, not a flipper. Because if I list a property, I have an obligation to the seller. Okay. So, I always provide the best service related to real estate to my clients. My license is to help people buy and sell and lease real estate. Okay, I can't give you great service about electrical service or plumbing or roofing or appliances. First of all, I'm not licensed for that. My insurance, my E&O insurance would not cover me for that. Second of all, and maybe this is first of all, I don't know anything about that stuff. It's not my area of expertise. But what I typically do is I have a group of vendor partners that I work with, like Compass, Title, and Escrow, so we can talk to them about any issues that may arise. If you needed to coordinate moving your belongings out of the house, you'd reach out to GMETS Moving and Storage, www.gmetsmoving.com. That's G as in George, M as in Michael, E as in Edward, G as in Tom, Z as in Zebra, moving.com. You can schedule a move or you can get a price quote by going to that site. You can do all this from your own home. Okay? And then, of course, we also have Vern Rainville, Public Insurance Adjuster. Vern is licensed by the state of Rhode Island to be a public insurance adjuster, and he works for the property owner, not the insurance company. I've had clients before that I've worked with where upon inspecting the house, it appears like there's something wrong with a roof, something. And it may be something covered by their insurance. So we bring someone like Vern in, and Vern can determine, he'll look at the policy and see if it is covered by insurance, and then make sure that they receive the maximum amount of money from the insurance company that they are entitled to based on their insurance policy. Vern Rainville, Public Insurance Adjuster, 484-300-8495. That's 484-300-8495. Vern Rainville, Public Insurance Adjuster. Even if you have a claim that you haven't put in yet, and it's as much as 12, 18, 24 months ago, Vern may be able to help you with that. So Vern Rainville, give him a call. Doesn't cost anything. 484-300-8495. Vern is a local guy. Even though his phone is an out-of-state number, he is an in-state guy. 484-300-8495. Vern Rainville, Public Insurance Adjuster, licensed by the state of Rhode Island. And I have other folks that I can refer you to as well. If it's getting work done in the yard, cleaning services, you need electrical work, plumbing work, radon inspection, radon detection, radon testing. Okay, we have people that we can refer you to because that's not my area of specialization. So I refer my clients to people that do have a specialization in that area. And I'll usually give you one, not just one, but 2, 3, or 4 names to call. So you can decide who you want to work with. Because everybody that I refer clients to, they're all professional, they're all full-time, they're all insured, and they're ethical. They're fair. Now, if you say, Joe, who's the cheapest one? I have no idea, because I don't ask my vendor partners what they charge for a mortgage, what they charge for a home inspection, what they charge for an electrical inspection, because that would be between the consumer and the professional. Okay, and I would not, so I don't even know when someone says, well, how much is it going to cost me for a home inspection? Well, what I do know is that if you're buying a 700 square foot two-bedroom house with 1 bath, that is going to cost less than a 3,000 square foot 4-bedroom home with 3.5 baths. How much less? I don't know. I know that a single-family home will be less than a 3-family home, where you have 3 different heating systems, 3 different bathrooms, 3 different kitchens, etc. So there are certain assumptions that I can make, but I do not know what the numbers are. I don't know what Home Inspector 1, how he or she would compare to Home Inspector number 2. Okay, that's all. Because the other thing is, too, what are you hiring them to do? Is it just a basic inspection, or do you need to get the well inspected? Do you need a radon test? Do you need a septic system test? There are a lot of different things that you can test for. Do you want a lead test? Okay, these are the things that make one home inspection more costly than another home inspection. Okay. So that's why I, steer clear of that. Lenders, what's the interest rate? What are the points? I have no idea how they calculate it, but I just refer my people to the right um, professionals, and they can make the decision what they want to do. All right. So, what's been in the news the past week all over the place is the tragedy in California. The fires are just horrendous. And the thing that's really sad about this is exacerbating a problem that's already in existence. There's not enough housing, and it's too expensive, especially in the areas of California where these fires are. So, I saw a number 94,000 people were on the evacuation list. So that's pretty big. That's more than twice as big as the entire town of Cumberland. So you have all these people who have to find a place to live. Now, okay, they can get a hotel, but you can't live in a hotel forever because typically most of us don't have the money, you can't afford to do that. But also, a problem that they're encountering in California is it takes a really long time to receive the necessary permits to rebuild a home. TV's on here, I'm looking at some pictures now. All that's left of these homes is a chimney. And if my brother lives out there, his business partner, his house, his beach house was burnt down the last set of fires that they had, which was, I don't know if it was 3, 4, or 5 years ago. It was at least 3 years ago, okay? Last week, he just received the permit to start building his new house. Now, this guy has another place to live, so it's a big deal, but it's not that big of a deal. And he's, fairly well-heeled. So he can afford to pay the people, the professionals, to do what they need to do to build him another house. But imagine if that were your house, your primary residence, and you had to wait 3 years before you received a permit to start building the house. And I don't know, again, I'm not a rocket scientist, but I'll bet you dollars to donuts that the price of the materials has increased significantly, along with everything else, due to inflation, in 3 years. I will also bet that getting professionals to build the house now is going to be a lot more expensive, especially because there are tens of thousands of other houses that were burnt to the ground that are also going to need to be rebuilt. So supply and demand, there's going to be a lot more demand on these contractors to build houses today than there was before. I can't remember how many houses were burnt to the ground in that first set of fires where he lost his. But from what I understand, the one now is much bigger than any other wildfires that they've had in California. All right, so it's going to be really expensive. So this is a perfect example of where the government is making a situation worse because the government, that is political leaders, they basically abdicated themselves from any leadership and responsibility to protect the public. Again, and we're going to jump on California because in 2014, the voters voted to allocate millions of dollars for the construction of new reservoirs of water so that in times like this, when there were fires, because these fires, it's not a freak occurrence, they happen every year. Every year, they have strong winds. So since 2014, they have built 0 reservoirs of water for the fire department to use. So when you have a situation where a lot of these houses were on the mountainside, and the reservoir that they had to access was lower than these homes, so now you have a reservoir that doesn't have enough water in it to begin with, and now that water has to be pushed uphill to extinguish the fire in these houses. And you have multiple demands being made on this reservoir. So even before the reservoir was run dry, the power that the water was coming out of the fire hydrants with was diminished because there were so many demands being placed on the limited amount of water that they had. So that was one thing that, the political leaders, again, they just did not do what they should have done. They should have taken those monies that were approved to build reservoirs, and they should have built them. Something else, forest, management. Again, we know that these fires come on a regular basis, and we know that when there is fuel for a fire, that fire will grow and become more intense and expand rapidly. One way to avoid that from happening is, of course, to remove the fuel. So all the down branches and leaves and all that dry debris, that dry organic debris that's on the ground, that needs to be removed on a regular basis. Now, it can be removed by physically removing it. Sometimes they have what are called controlled burns to remove that fuel. Something else they also need to do to manage the forest area is have fire breaks and fire roads. So if you keep the fire roads clear, then the fire trucks can go and attack the fire in the forest before it starts throwing embers up in the air that will be picked up by the Santa Ana winds and blown miles away on other houses and create other fires and more embers. Fire breaks, where they clear out paths so that the fire cannot continue along this area because there's no fuel for the fire. And fire roads so that the fire trucks and the equipment can be delivered to where it's needed before it starts burning houses. None of these things were done. We know that these fires occur. It doesn't have anything to do with global warming. The fires occur because of, usually it's human error. If it's human error by someone throwing a cigarette down or not putting a campfire out, or human error by someone not appropriately managing electrical wires, that's typically what happens. And unfortunately, the voters in California, they weren't aware of the responsibilities and the obligations that their political leaders had, and they chose to either ignore or not demand that those monies be spent for what the monies were allocated for. So maybe they were ignoring that these monies were being spent on, excessive salaries, feeding illegal immigrants, housing illegal immigrants. I don't know. But clearly the money went somewhere, because we're talking tens upon tens of millions of dollars. And the state is in the red. When the governor took over, when Governor Newsom took over, I think I can't remember if it was like $40 billion surplus, and now it's swung the opposite way. And they're like $20 billion in the hole, or don't quote me on those exact numbers, but it's a significant swing like that. And again, for perspective, folks, California is the 10th, just the state of California is the 10th largest economy in the world. So that means there are only 9 countries that have more economic activity than California. Now, that was the last that I heard. That maybe I'm off by a little bit, but it's a huge economy. Maybe they're 11th in the world now because a lot of people have moved out. But this state should be managed, should be run by leaders who understand what they have to do. They understand and appreciate that the public is placing their trust in these political leaders, and the political leaders are obligated to maintain as much public safety as possible. Where it stands right now, in addition to the tens upon thousands of people who are homeless, there are at least 24 that have lost their life. They're saying it's going to cost $50 billion to recover from this. Now, again, think about the government, folks. If they're saying it's $50 billion to do that, to make those repairs and rebuild, that's today in 2025. What happens if they don't get this done until 26, 27, 28? That number of 50 billion is going to increase because the price of the materials will probably increase. Okay. Folks, you are listening to the Joe Luca Real Estate Show right here on WNRI 99.9 on the FM dial, 1380 on the AM dial. And you can also catch us on WNRI.com streaming. And we rebroadcast the show every Saturday right here on 99.9 and 1380. So you can listen to it then as well. And that's the Joe Luca Real Estate Show, 6 to 7 o'clock p.m. at WNRI. And we're talking about the fires in California. I don't want to go on too much longer, but what I'm trying to do is inform you, educate you about things that contribute to and exacerbate the housing shortage that we have in this country. We're millions of homes short from where we need to be. It's not just Rhode Island, it's not just Massachusetts, it's not just California. Nationwide, we have millions of homes that have not been built. And what happens, the government gets involved and they do things that make it more expensive for people to build a home, for people to buy a home, for consumers to sell a home, and even live in a home. And some people can weather these charges, these fees, these expenses more readily than other folks. But the people who have the hardest time are the ones who can least afford it, of course. The poorest in society, the poorest members of our society, the elderly, and then, of course, young folks, first-time home buyers. And the government has been doing things that put home ownership out of reach for many of us. Or they make it much more difficult for many of us to maintain home ownership. Well, how do they do that, Joe? Well, of course, adding lots of fees and taxes. That's one way they do it. Requiring contractors to, in many cases, overbuild homes. Increasing minimum lot sizes for builders. So the minimum size that a house lot can be is larger. So that means fewer homes can be built in a given area. That makes it more expensive for people to buy those homes, for those homes to be built and thereby sold to home buyers. That's a big one, minimum lot sizes. but then also requiring a lot of regulations that may be well intentioned, but sometimes aren't necessarily for the benefit of most people. Okay? So pay attention to what, and I've said this many times before, pay attention to what your politicians are doing, what your political leaders are doing, and what they're saying. What they're doing and what they're saying. Because a lot of times these politicians, the only thing that they're worried about, the main thing that they're worried about, is getting reelected, raising money for their campaign. And it's secondary. The secondary consideration is the impact that what they do or don't do will have on their electability. Right here in Rhode Island, we have the debacle of the 195 bridge. We're not going to get into that, but that has been a huge impact on the local economy. Why was that bridge in such poor condition? Well, because probably the state didn't allocate monies appropriately to maintain the bridge, to inspect the bridge. And there are mathematical formulas, and I don't know what they are, but I know they exist, that when something is declining in its usability, if it's a road or a bridge, when 10% of its life is diminished, is used up, it's a lot less expensive to make those repairs than if you wait 2, 3, 4, 5 more years when it's 60 or 70% of its life as opposed to 90% of its life. The increase in cost of maintenance and repairs is much more painful. It's very significant. What these politicians should be doing, these political leaders should be doing, is money should be allocated, just like they did with the Newport Bridge, okay? That Newport Bridge, it's part of the budget when it was built because they used, I think, the wrong metal or something, is it's always getting painted. So they start painting at one end, they go all the way to the other end, and by the time they finish that, they have to go back to the other end and paint it again. Those monies are allocated, so the government, the state of Rhode Island, cannot abscond with those monies and put them into the general fund. Theoretically, what should have happened is we pay a gas tax in Rhode Island, at least those of us that drive petroleum vehicles, and those monies from the gas tax, the diesel tax, are supposed to be allocated to maintain roads and bridges. But our political leaders, at some point in the past, did not want to make difficult decisions to cut back on spending, and so they took that chunk of money, because it wasn't being used, and put it into the general fund. So now they have more money to play with to give out for constituent relations. We have no one to blame but ourselves for electing the people who don't do a good job. Politicians, their job is to make you like them. So a lot of us say, well, my legislator, my councilman, my congressman, he's a really nice guy, I like him. My senator is a nice guy, I like him. Well, I'm sure he or she is a nice person, but their job is to make you think that they are a nice person, to make you like them, so that you will vote for them. But if you are calling them up every week, questioning them about a bill that they sponsored, about how they voted, because it didn't make sense, because what they were saying and what they were doing weren't in agreement, you probably would not like him or her as much. And we need to be very engaged, we, the citizens, in the political process. Tonight in Rhode Island, the governor is making his State of the State address. This will be very interesting. Pay attention. You know, our governor is another one of the professional politicians. He used to be a businessman, but now he is a politician. He was mayor of Cumberland, then he was lieutenant governor, now he's governor. You know, we need to have term limits, because every decision that these politicians make is, how is this going to affect, what impact will this have on my reelection? Okay, the politicians are very reluctant to make the tough decisions because they may be unpopular with a lot of people. You know, I was at an event several years ago, and there was a political leader, a person who was very smart, and this individual had pointed out that, you know, we were creating an underclass, or not even an underclass, a class of people who feel that they are entitled to receive things from the government for free. If it's money, if it's health care, education, whatever it is. And when this group of people outnumbers the people who are paying, then we have a problem. If the people who are earning the money and paying the bulk of the taxes are outnumbered by the people who are receiving the largesse of the government, we could have a problem because there won't be enough money. So the thing I want to implore you to do, everyone listening, is pay attention to what our politicians are saying and what they are doing. And then if they're saying something, or if they're questioning someone, what are their qualifications? You know, I was watching the nomination proceedings for the Secretary of Defense today, and it was an embarrassment. Some of these politicians are Jack Reed, Senator Jack Reed was one of them. It was embarrassing, the line of questioning that they made for this individual who was nominated to be Secretary of Defense. Now, a lot of these people, they're not even aware what the qualification requirement is for the Secretary of Defense. And they're asking all of these questions, and a lot of these individuals were very emotional in what they were doing. You know, their line of questioning was very, I would say, almost like histrionic. And that's not what we need. We don't need emotion. We need people who understand what the job is and understand what the requirements are, what the qualifications are for someone to occupy that position, in this case, the Secretary of Defense. You know, strong leadership, decision-making abilities, experience in defense policy making. This guy wrote a book. He went to Princeton University for undergraduate, and then he went to Harvard University for graduate school. He was in the military, fought in Afghanistan and Iraq, and was in Guantanamo Bay. So this guy has a lot of bona fides, much greater than the folks who are asking him a line of questions that I felt were insulting. Because if those same questions were turned on these politicians, allegations about drinking, allegations about infidelity, many of the politicians who were asking these questions would bow their heads down and walk away. It reminds me of, in the good news, in the Gospels, when they're going to stone a woman who was accused of adultery, and Jesus said, "Let those of you who are without sin throw the first stone." And everybody dropped the stones and walked away. Because they had sinned too. And our politicians, our members of Congress and the Senate, we're all sinners, of course. We're all sinners. But the members of Congress have made flagrant errors in judgment. Many of them have broken the law. And I would love to know, if they could ever release it, how much money the government spent keeping things quiet when allegations came up against politicians who were drunk and got into an accident and hurt someone, sexually assaulted someone, sexually abused someone. If you look at the profile of the members of Congress and how many of them are overextended, who don't pay their federal taxes, they are a reflection of the population at large. But, which is okay, we're all sinners. We all make mistakes. But they're going on and carrying on and making accusations and questioning other people as if they are on a high horse and have never done anything wrong. And they are completely intolerant of anyone else who may or may not have made a mistake similar to the ones that they are alleging. So, this is going to be, we'll see what happens with this. The Secretary of Defense. Next, we're going to have, I think the next big one is going to be Tulsi Gabbard, and then Robert F. Kennedy Jr., both of whom are former Democrats. So we'll see how their Democrat politicians treat them. Even the President Trump, he used to be a Democrat. But again, we get what we deserve. We need to pay attention to what the politicians are saying and what they are doing. And we need not be intimidated by others and keep our mouths closed. We need to make noise and call them out. And again, I don't care if they're Republican or Democrat or independent, because even that clown independent senator from Maine was an embarrassment. When people are abusing their position to intimidate others and retain power for themselves, that's when we have to be paying extra attention. Why? Because these things affect our lives. This is a real estate show. All of these things that I'm talking about tonight directly impact housing. The cost of buying a house, the cost of building a house, the cost of selling a house, the cost of living in a house. Mistakes that are made. These poor people in California, because of the policies of the state of California, many insurance companies, or several insurance companies, last year announced they were no longer doing business in the state of California. And the homeowners' insurance policies for many of these homeowners whose houses were just burnt down, just a matter of weeks ago, they lost coverage for fire damage. And it's my understanding, this is anecdotal, I don't know if it's fact or not, that the folks who do have coverage, it only covers up to $2 or $3 million for the value of your home. So if you have a $9 million home, and it's going to cost you $9 million to rebuild it, you're going to receive whatever the number is, $2 or $3 million for the insurance company, and that difference is going to come out of your pocket. Or you're going to have to build a smaller, less expensive, less grandiose house. These are the consequences of a lack of leadership or leadership by individuals that are selfish and power hungry. It's kind of ironic that the individual that was responsible, the individual whose responsibility was to make sure, or one of the responsibilities was to make sure the fire hydrants work, makes $750,000, and she didn't do her job. You know, if you're a New England Patriot fan, several years ago we had the saying that you saw everywhere, do your job. Do your job. What's your job? Kicker? Just to kick, okay? Get the field goal, get the point after touchdown. Do your job. If you're in charge of the fire hydrants, do your job. Make sure that those fire hydrants work and there's adequate water in those fire hydrants. You know, I saw just this morning or last night, the governor of California said he is suspending all environmental regulations. So hopefully this will make it easier, but maybe that was just a soundbite. Maybe there are other things in place that are still going to make it extraordinarily expensive and time-consuming to rebuild these houses. Excuse me. You know, in addition to houses, I can't count the number of properties that had very expensive cars that were in the driveway or in garages that were completely destroyed. You know, and again, knowing insurance companies and their policies, I'll bet most of those cars were not insured for fire damage. Maybe they were, I don't know. And everyone else, you know, if you're just saying, well, all those rich people, there are some people out there, who are saying that they deserve it, they should lose their houses, which is horrible. You never say that. You should say that about anyone. But it's not just individuals. Folks, where these fires were, there were lots of ranches. So no one has talked about the number of horses that were burned to death because of these fires. You know, a horse that's in a stable, that's on fire. Imagine how frightened they are, and then they get out and there's fire all around them. Horses, donkeys, all those animals, llamas, I'm sure. You know, it's not just quote-unquote rich people. There are a lot of regular people, and there's a lot of livestock that died because of this. And it was completely preventable if our political leaders had done what they were supposed to do. Because it was not a matter of money. The monies had been allocated. Every year, the Cascade Mountains, all the snow melts and all of this water comes down. That could have been used to fill up these reservoirs if they had built them. And that would have minimized the impact of these fires. But what do? They just directed it right into the Pacific Ocean. Now, the allegations are to save some small fish. All right, so to save some small fish, what was the unintended consequence? You know, I read somewhere that one of the reasons they did not build fire breaks in the forest is because it interrupted migratory paths of a specific breed of mouse. Folks, you know, I'm sorry, but a human life is more valuable than that of a mouse. A human life is more valuable than that of a fish. And we need to accept that fact. And we need to make decisions accordingly. We, our politicians. Because again, the politicians, they don't care about you and me. They only care about themselves. That's all they care about. All these big politicians, they only care about getting reelected, raising money. That's true at the state level, and it's definitely true at the federal level. Locally, I refrain from saying that they all do that. Many do, many don't. But at the local level, there's much more of a better chance that you will have a direct connection, or can have a direct connection with your politicians, because you can march right down to town hall or city hall and confront them in person. Okay, folks, I'm sorry, we're at the end of the show. I want to thank you for tuning in. I want to thank our sponsors, Compass Title and Escrow, Vern Rainville, Public Insurance Adjuster, 484-30084, and of course, G. Metz Moving and Storage. George Metz does a great job. All of those guys are employees of the company. gmetzmoving.com. Please check them out. I want to thank those sponsors. I want to thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next week, same bat time, same bat channel. And again, I apologize for kind of lecturing everyone, but it's so important for everybody to be politically engaged. Pay attention so that we do not experience here in Rhode Island and Massachusetts what those folks are experiencing in California because of the negligence of their political leaders. And that's exactly what it is. It's negligence. Okay? So please pay attention, stay engaged, become engaged, and we will be back next Tuesday right here on WNRI 99.9 FM 1380 on the AM dial and WNRI.com for the Joe Luca Real Estate Show. Next up, we have the State of the State address for Rhode Island. Normally we have Rick Murnia coming in with the some great scripture readings, but we'll be back next week. Please stay tuned, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye. Hey guys, thank you so much. Bye-bye.